Let people let us know what they're thinking about.
Yeah, I had one, Pete, so I live on Quarry Lane, and we abut right up to Granite Lakes.
Yeah.
At the end of my street, there's like basically a bad dirt path that leads over. And ideally, if that could get paved somehow, or maybe some low scale lighting or something like that, a really inexpensive project. There's a ton of people that utilize it, and it connects all the way up to the Blue Hills, through that back access road that's there. That was just one that's kind of been on my mind, and that's why I joined tonight.
So it's a neighborhood connection to Quarry Hills?
Yeah, at the end, so Quarry Lane is a dead end street.
Yeah.
So at the end of the dead end street, there's access over to the pathway up to the Blue Hills, but it's kind of like a dirt beat up path with a lot of overgrown, vegetation and stuff like that. So there's utility poles that run down there that provide power. So getting power for some low scale lighting should be really easy. And then we're having the DPW is actually doing some of our sidewalks, so I know they do paving. So again, I was looking at it as just something, nothing like pavers or anything like that, just asphalt, to make it a little easier for people to traverse.
Mm-hmm.
Sean,
Do you
is
know,
there?
is it on public property?
Yeah, that was my question.
Yeah, it's actually park-owned land at the end of the street.
Yeah.
Oh,
I would encourage you to, submit an application, kind of identify a project and what it might be, and, ultimately how many people might benefit and what it might cost. Even at the eligibility, it certainly would qualify as a recreation project, and the connection to open space. So it kind of fits in both categories. The open space is really at this point purchasing land, and if there were any rights we had to get, but it certainly could qualify as a recreation project, and I think it'd be a good one, and particularly making a connection up to the trail system of the Blue Hills is again one of the goals, to make these connections. So that sounds like a good project to me.
Okay, thank you.
I have something actually that goes kind of exactly with what Sean was saying. I also live in Precinct 8, a town meeting member, and I live close as well to the Quarry Hills. And my thought process was fairly recently, there was maybe a year ago, there was a project where one of the residents was actually trying to have some of the land actually sold, or to have land, to purchase the land from the town. And it was at that point that I started reading the Quarry Hills lease, and I became more involved because I knew the resident that wanted to buy the land. So I was kind of in a little bit of a quandary trying to figure out, where I sat on everything. But in that process, I read through the quarry lease, and there's actually, it's interesting because you read through the lease, there's actually language in the lease about there's supposed to be trails for the citizens to use. We're supposed to be accessing it. And the issue that came up really wasn't about that, but I brought that up, with some of the select board. I'm like, all right, like, we're not even following the lease here. Like and I bring this up because I liked the component of the discussion tonight about having, these grants or having partnerships, with, and I'm thinking Quarry Hills, like if we did, some of it, like they should be doing this, like some of it, like I don't want to get money, what they should be doing, but I'm just thinking bigger picture, because I don't think people use, Sean is saying, like, there are access routes throughout a lot of the different streets. Quarry Hills, I think Orchard, I think there's access from there on, it's Lyman Road. That's the one I'm thinking of.
Lyman.
Right.
That has most of the access. And that's where they wanted to buy the piece of, the property. Because I want to say there's like 3 or 4 access points. Some of them are bigger than others on Lyman. But again, that's just a thought process. So.
Yeah, Steve, I remember when that whole Quarry Hills planning process was going on, and there was a big fight and negotiation to get them include trail connections into and through the property, and they haven't followed through. It's really, ultimately a selectman's issue to what degree they're going to try to enforce Quarry Hills to do what they want to, or, we can look at funding some of those things ourselves. So I think that is a real issue with our committee's not going to be able to negotiate with Quarry Hills to fulfill their lease agreement, but that would be a selectman issue.
It is, yeah.
These kind of trail connections, I think, are, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Well, and the kind of thing that I would love to see with these types of projects is just, some signage and some indication that these access points exist. I've only lived in town for 14 years, and so I don't know where all these little hidden gems are, and sometimes you need to know somebody who lives in the neighborhood who could say, hey, yeah, this is actually an access point that you can get to these trail systems. So I know that in a lot of towns, when the CPC funds projects, whether they're for trail systems or for renovating historic buildings or whatever, they usually include really nice signage that says, hey, community preservation works, and this is a project that was funded by the CPC, and it's available to the public for all of us to enjoy.
Sure. Or this way to the Blue Hills, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
are any of you members of the Friends of the Blue Hills?
Yeah, I
I
am.
am not.
I know Pete is. So anyways, if you get our communications, I hope everybody will sign up, considering how valuable it is to the community. And we do a lot for the trails, and we do a lot for the park. All volunteer organization, 1,500 members, been around since the late 70s, early 80s. And it's all about preserving, protecting, and promoting the Blue Hills, of which, 30% is in Milton. So it's not going to be a commercial just for the Friends of the Blue Hills, I promise. But everything that was mentioned on the open space list is what we do, right? So trails. When we talk about trails, we think about trails not only in terms of improving trails and maintaining trails, but we also think about access. And we not only think about access within the town of Milton, or in some cases all the way from Rhode Island to Punkapog Pond, which is an open project. But we also think about access from other communities outside of Milton. So, we think about busing. Why can nobody take a bus from Mattapan to the park? And I know that's not in the context of the CPA, but just in terms of access, it's something that we also work on and we advocate for. Maybe the other one that's a very direct hit, Pete, which you would know, is this idea of buffer zones and where I'd say maybe the risks are to the Blue Hills Reservation, and there's been many, right? And also where the opportunities are, where maybe there is private land that's not zoned very friendly to preservation, that could be either bought or could be negotiated into conservation land. But we got to know where those buffers are. We got to know where those tracts of lands are across 6 different communities. But we could certainly start in Milton, and we've had some discussions with Pete and also with Tim about how we could kick something off just to identify all the tracts of lands around the park.
Well, Matt, I think that we've begun a buffer study around the Blue Hills.
That's what I'm talking
And
about.
hopefully one of the things will be identify where the threats are, and maybe conservation restrictions, maybe there's opportunities for acquisition, to protect the Blue Hills. And certainly things within the town of Milton are reasonable, are things that the Friends could submit an application to fund, something that serves Milton, but at the same time, helps the Blue Hills. So certainly a reasonable, place for an application. We don't know until we start getting applications.
Sure.
The friend, being DCR property, a lot of this you would think that DCR would fund, but we all know how that works.
Yeah.
So
I was going to mention, and again, some of this is as I get closer to the process, and hopefully we can have that discussion with myself and probably Judy, our ED, just to get a bit more clarity on yeah, left pocket, right pocket. Because like you said, Pete, you know,
Yeah.
the DCR is supposed to be doing a lot, and but they run out of people and they run out of time.
Right.
Other comments, people who haven't spoken that might have some ideas or want to talk about things? I know we probably only got about 4 or 5 more minutes before they're going to call us back together, but you know, it's a great opportunity, and I'm hoping that we get a lot of interest. We're not going to be able to fund everything right away, but getting people to think about, I mean, myself, I do all parks work, and most of my work over the last 15 to 20 years has been CPA funded projects. So the opportunities are great. So we just need people to put their creative, you know, heads together and think of some projects that really can help the community.
Just piggybacking on what you're saying, Pete, about thinking creatively. Matt, I think that this comment is maybe more geared towards you or for other applicants who are representing organizations. But I know in other communities, nonprofit organizations that have applied for CPA money they've been really creative as far as how they've used the funds to leverage bigger money in some really creative ways, you know, like matching campaigns, that kind of thing, or using it as, you know, matching funds for larger grant opportunities through the state and the federal government. But there's, you know, sometimes these big projects take a creative quilt sort of approach, of this patchwork quilt approach, to cobble together smaller bits of money to get really good big projects done.
Wendy, I'd like to, you've got something in mind, so maybe, yeah, well, I'll figure out how to get more detail from you at some point in the future. I'd like a best practice. You're so close to giving it to me, but we probably gonna run out of time. I'll find you. I'll find you somewhere.
Sounds good.
Yeah, or just, you know, info@friendsofthebluehills.org, and we'll get to the right place. Or Matt@friendsofthebluehills.org.
Well, I'm just thinking of one of the sort of sweetheart projects that comes to mind with CPA success stories is down in the town of Plymouth, where I used to live, and I was a member of the CPC down there. A million years ago, they were one of the earliest adopters of the CPA, and they created this incredible open space project in which they acquired an old cranberry bog that the farmer was going out of business and wanted to put the land in conservation. The CPA put in, I think, like $1 or $2 million to acquire the parcel, but then it became like this $30 million restoration project. Wow. that involved this long list of partners, you know, including state and federal government and dozens of nonprofits. And it just sort of took on a life of its own with just, I mean, not that $1 or $2 million is a tiny seed, but it's but it started with the CPA money, and it got people thinking really creatively.
Cool.
So,
yeah, thanks.
I guess people can join other groups if there's nothing. I think we're going to be called back together pretty soon, but certainly there's opportunities to, and there's Tucker, there's opportunities to leave here and join one of the other groups if you want.
I'm staying.
We'll see what Tucker has to say. We're talking about various opportunities. We're talking about various opportunities that, you know, people might be thinking about, and talking about trail connections a lot, and connecting, you know, cooperating with the Friends of the Blue Hills on some of the work they're doing, and things like that.
Well, I can throw out something. I mean, I don't know how it ranks in terms of accessibility for the wider town, but I live at the far end of Canton Avenue. I know you can't build sidewalks, but there are a lot of, you know, recreational walkers and bicyclists, you know, who would like to have a safer access somehow up Canton Avenue, or, you know, Brush Hill Road into the Blue Hills, either to the Summit Road or something. The developer, Northland, is supposedly building an interior path on its property, but it's sort of no man's land. I mean, my children are in their 30s now, and they didn't learn to ride a bicycle until they spent, they went off to camp or something, because Canton Avenue is toxic in terms of traffic. Greater accessibility, safer for walking in many places, not just there, but using that as to promote healthier lifestyles and certainly safety.
And Tucker, we also, which you would know from just some email exchange about studying the buffer zones around the park, and just getting closer to, which tracks are vulnerable, which might be opportunities for, purchase or zoning changes,
Right.
Which is, as Pete rightfully said, is we've kicked it off in the town of Milton. So Pete, what do you think in terms of being able to see some data from y'all? Is this something that's active?
Last week was our deadline for proposals. We got 2 proposals to do the buffer study.
Super.
So now we just have to select one, execute a contract, and get them started. But it's only going to be like a 3 or 4 month effort, to analyze that and basically look at zoning all around the perimeter of the Blue Hills, and look for threats, either because of the zoning seems real an attractive thing for a large development, or if there's ecological things that we feel could harm the Blue Hills. So we'll be identifying parcels, and within the next few months we'll start getting data out of that.
Yeah, and I think we're partners on that from a funding standpoint also.
You're funding it.
Yeah, exactly. Partners.
You're putting up the funding for it.
Partners, right?
Yeah.
However we get there. So I don't know, Wendy, maybe
hopefully that'll identify some great opportunities to make
just a good example of how we're already working together and how we can, pool our resources to make an impact.
And Steve and Sean, in your neighborhood, we haven't really reached out to Cunningham Park yet. And, that's a great recreational and open space resource for the whole town. And, connecting from your neighborhoods in there, or, how that all fits together. That's a great resource.
I liked the mention, Pete. I'm not sure what I thought about shuffleboard. I didn't know whether that was proposed for people my age or older, but I mean, there's the whole pickleball phenomenon. But again, being able to promote walking or jogging or what have you that is removed from traffic in some way. I don't know how, but trails within a particular site. I know Cunningham is a private foundation, but I don't know.
But a lot of this, again, we're putting together this plan and we have some ideas in it, but really the projects have to come out of applications. So
right.
Put your thinking caps on how to make it a project. And,
well,
so that
one source of possible information. I know that the two white steeple churches in town center flanking the town hall, they have collaborated for programming for teenagers, and that might be a source of ideas, of a focus group for I'm sure.
Now where did you get thrown into now?
Now we all got thrown into one room, right?
Yes. I'd be happy to report on our recreation thing just to get this off, because I know we have limited time. A lot of our discussion really revolved around trail connections from neighborhoods into potential open space, or how to connect people and provide new opportunities. Talked about the Blue Hills or neighborhoods abutting Quarry Hills or Cunningham Park, and how those, how we can encourage better recreation connections, and the idea of maybe, doing something to highlight the trailheads, maybe some signage or something that, access path to the Blue Hills and things like that. So most of our discussion had to do with trails, and also how creatively to put different elements of a project together to either create a bigger project or to get support by working together on projects. So in the short amount of time we had to discuss, there was some lively discussion about expanding recreational opportunities.
Great. Thanks, Pete. Linda, do you want to highlight on the historic preservation room?
Well, I think our big point of discussion was talking with the representative of the trustees, board of trustees at the Forbes House Museum about the possibilities of using CPA funds there. And certainly the notion that even a private organization deserves to be understood as contributing to the culture of our town, the culture and history of our town, so that deservedly funds will go to preservation of those buildings, even though they are not on town-owned property.
Great, thanks. Tom, do you want to highlight on housing a little bit?
Sure. I mean, we spent most of our time talking about not a specific project, but the need to build more of a vocal constituency for affordable housing in town, and the lack of sort of organized support for housing has hamstrung our efforts in the past. So that's not a specific CPC responsibility, but there's a number of, I think, efforts bubbling up in that regard, and I think that will help the town think expansively about affordable housing options here. There was one new idea that was brought up, a potential collaboration with the library around their need for parking, and maybe that parking also serving a double purpose as parking for affordable housing in some lots in and around the library. So those are the types of, sort of multiple use, mixed use, maybe that could have some historic preservation and open space components to it as well. So anyways, that was one specific idea that was raised, as well as we briefly talked about town farm as well. So
Great.
Thank you, Rob.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, so that kind of concludes our forum for this evening. I just want to thank everybody who came, gave some input. This certainly won't be our last time. I think before our plan is done in September, I think we will be meeting again. And I also just want to thank also Sustainable Milton and the Friends of the Blue Hills for coming out. I think we will try to arrange a meeting for some private organizations in town as well, just to get their input. I think that was a great idea as well. And so thank you, everybody. I really appreciate all the questions, and thank you for your time.
Rob, before you go?
Yes.
Can we plan on the 16th as our next meeting, or
yeah,
third
yes.
Thursday in the month, or I don't know?
I think it was July. Let me check again, but I think it was like, was that the next meeting for us? Does anyone know? Was it the 6th or was it the 16th? I forget. Let me check my calendar really quick.
Okay.
But you know what? I will get the date out to you guys and
Okay.
I have July 7th. I have July 7th.
Okay, there you go. So I thought it was earlier in the month as well. So that's probably the date.
Yeah, I have the 7th as well.
Okay, you're right. It is July 7th at 7 o'clock. That's our next meeting date. And I know we have got a lot to talk about there. So
Do we need to formally adjourn? Is that?
I don't think so, because it's just a public forum, right?
All right.
No, it's a public hearing. This is the
Is
required
it?
public hearing. Yes.
Yeah, which is a point. I don't think we ever posted anything, did we?
Oh,
No,
yeah.
We did.
Oh, yeah,
This
it was
was-
Oh,
posted.
did we?
This is
Okay.
totally posted. How
So
do
I
you
move
think
we
30
adjourn.
people showed up?
Yes.
I
So we
do
need,
wanna
Thought it
make
was the
the-
article in the Ledger.
so anybody want to
I do
Yeah,
want
I'll
to
make a motion to
No,
adjourn?
I want to make a
Linda.
point. I want to make a point before we formally adjourn, and it's in response to Tucker and in response to everybody. And it happens to be my personal point of view, but in fact, by preserving historic buildings, we do what Tucker is interested in terms of environmental protection. It is more environmentally friendly to preserve those buildings that we can, rather than tear them down and build something new. And think about it in terms of providing housing rather than leveling, a perfectly good building and providing new structures. There are innovative ways we can think about using and preserving a historic structure and also meeting our needs for housing. I think a little bit of creative thinking goes a long way towards achieving both historic preservation goals and also some environmental goals and housing goals as well. It takes a little bit of work. It takes some creative thinking and legwork to make that all come together. But I was struck, Tucker, by your interest in doing exactly that. And also the larger discussion about how we can work on the synergy of pulling some of these projects together as we look at how the funds are spent. So that happens to be the end of my what I wanted to add, but I did want to add that before we break up.
The greenest building is one that already exists.
That's true.
Really, that's
There-
true.
There's a great project, in case anyone wants to know, the Shovel Works project. That's a great example of a historic building that was
I worked on that.
preserved. So that was preserved and affordable housing was there. It's a great example of a project.
Is that the one in Northeastern?
Yeah, it's the one,
Yeah.
it's the AIM Shovel Shop, and it
Yeah.
won the Community Preservation Coalition's, Project of the Year when it was
You just
done.
made my case for the point of view I was putting forward.
Exactly.
There you go.
I'm all for it. So, all right. Anyone else have anything else to say, or if not,
I would move to adjourn.
Second,
all right. So Tom,
Yeah.
Kathleen.
Yes.
I'm not a member.
Oh, that's true. Wendy. Wendy, you're on mute.
Yes.
Now I gotta try to find all of you. Pete,
yes.
Linda,
Yes.
Tom already said yes. Rob, yes. Joe.
Yes.
All
yes.
right. I think that's everybody who's left. All right.
Thank everybody
well.
for
For all your
coming.
work, everyone.